Hello and welcome. My name is Zaffar Iqbal, and you are watching the Mojo Story. In a U turn of sorts, the government has announced to ban the export of wheat with immediate effect, just 48 hours after it announced to send trade delegations to 9 countries for exploring possibilities of wheat exports. Now, this is a significant development. It also is an indicator to the shaky policy that the government has adopted. But what has led to the change in the policy? How does it impact the farmers and the consumers on the ground? We're joined by Devinder Sharma, who is a distinguished food and trade policy analyst, an award winning Indian journalist, writer, and researcher. He will be joining us to discuss this issue. Welcome to the show, Devinder Sharma. Uh, what, according to you, had led the government to change its policy just 48 hours after it announced to send delegations to 9 countries to explore the possibilities of wheat export, and now this policy to ban wheat exports altogether?
Well, I think it is very obvious to all of us that the U-turn the government took, or some people call it knee-jerk reaction, essentially came after there was a lot of talk about India becoming the food provider for the rest of the world, and then suddenly, as you rightly said, roughly 48 hours after the government had announced a delegation going to some countries to look into the export possibilities, it enacted a ban on wheat exports. Well, I think, in my understanding, that was the very, very right step that the government took. And earlier, the estimates may have gone wrong, but I think when the government realized that it will not have enough stock left within the country to take care of its food security needs, and it should impose a ban because an unbridled wheat export is not what this country requires. And essentially, at a time when we are almost on an edge as far as our food security is concerned, and we must understand that if India had exported everything that it had, surplus that it carried, then of course we could have reached a stage where the food security concerns would have been of paramount, as far as the government is concerned. For them, it would have been a paramount concern, and we couldn't have even, let's say, gone into the global market with a begging bowl because there is no supplies available now. So I think it was a very right step that the government took.
But then why did 48 hours before this announcement, this announcement of sending delegations, that is what makes people feel that it was a knee jerk reaction. uh, Not much thought was given into it. Either the first step was wrong or the second step is wrong.
Zafarji, we agree with this. We completely agree with you what you are saying, that it was a knee-jerk reaction. There was a U-turn. Either the earlier estimates that the government probably had before it was not the real estimates that the country was able to provide. And I think, but the sooner they got to learn that it can land us in problems. I think the government did the right thing that they imposed a ban. I'm completely for that kind of a action because India cannot forego its food security for the sake of the benefit going to the trade as far as exports are concerned.
But how does it impact the farmers on the ground? That's the major chunk of population that will be directly affected by this decision.
Let me, say two things here. Zafar, it's very important to understand. An impression is being given around the country that as if this was a market reform. There was a immense possibility of a higher price coming to farmers and so
Yeah.
on. The fact of the matter is that it was actually a global tragedy. The war going on in Russia-Ukraine region is not something that we should take it as a market reform. It was just to meet that eventuality, that space that was created by the food supply shortage in those countries, that India had stepped in to fill the gap. But this impression that is going around is as if, my God, it was something that the earlier reforms that the government had taken back were also aiming at, and so the farmers have committed a mistake and so on. The answer is no. It was not it is not a reform. It was just to meet the eventuality. Secondly, coming to the farmers. Now, it's very interesting that I would always say that the farmers should get a higher price, and we have been saying that the time should come when the farmers, as far as all important commodities are concerned, should get a higher price vis-a-vis the minimum support price, and this is what was happening in the case of wheat this year. But I think the ban came at a time when the farmers' impact was very, very low, that we are unfortunately not talking about. Let me share with you. In India, we must know, all of us must know, that wheat harvest season begins from central India, and then for wheat proceeds upwards to the northwestern regions. Now, which means from Madhya Pradesh, the wheat harvest started in roughly in mid-March, and by the time it came to Punjab, or let's say the Amritsar district of Punjab, the extreme, roughly about more than 95% of the harvest as well as the sale by the farmers had already taken care of. And that means the farmers had received the higher price. The higher price was about 10 to 15 rupees was the premium per quintal in Punjab and Haryana, whereas in Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, we know that farmers got 200 to 300 rupees as the premium. Now, that has already been paid to farmers. But now some farmers had, of course, kept their stocks with them, because thinking that they would get a higher price subsequently, which means they were also ready to get into the game of speculation. Now, the point here is that there are several studies which points how much is that quantity. If even 1 or 2 million tons is what those farmers had, it doesn't mean that the entire community has lost out. The point is
But
that the government took.
but do you think that all those farmers who have kept those stocks now, they would be selling at an estimated lower price than what they would have expected? They should have been given some bonus as a compensation rather than they bailing out the urban population and the middle classes in urban areas?
Well, another question being asked to me is that the trade is going to suffer. So what do we do? We need to, because once the trade suffers, it means it will not be able to go with the commitments it had made to the farmers. That kind of impression is being created simply to protect the trade. Trade doesn't want to incur the losses. Now, my point is, what happens when the farmers throw their produce on the streets? Have you ever stood up and said that this is a loss that the farmers are going to incur? Let us come and support them, or provide them compensation in a manner that their livelihood can be taken off. Today, I saw a tweet which says that farmers, in the Gandhian way, are even supplying pineapple to passers-by free of cost, because they can't afford the prices that are being offered. So the point I'm trying to make is, I have never seen the country waking up and standing up and saying, oh, we must help the farmers who are throwing the produce on the streets and so on and so forth. But if the same market phenomena operates for trade, what is wrong? Why, when the government has already said that we will be extending the wheat procurement season till May 31st, which means those who have not been able to get a higher price can at least sell in the mandis and get the minimum support price. Now, that doesn't mean that the farmer should not get a bonus. I'm saying from the very beginning that this was a golden opportunity for India to have asked FCI to move in a big way. FCI should have given a bonus of 200 to 300 rupees per quintal to farmers and mopped up as much grain as possible. FCI should export it itself and also given to the trade to export. Now, that way, at least we could have compensated or covered up the losses that the FCI has been incurring year after year. Now, that was an opportunity, but we missed out. So farmers need to get a bonus. I think it is not only for those farmers who are left out now, but I think it is for all farmers. And the government has the record, because everyone who brings the produce to the mandis, the government has the record. And I think that is where the government should ensure that all of those who provided, grain in the mandis, sold to the government or the different agencies, will get a bonus.
But that brings us to the issue of farm laws. Do you think that if farm laws were there, it would have been quite difficult for the government to rather ban the export of the wheat? Then it would have been an open market, and farmers, wherever they would have got better returns, would have sold the wheat.
Well, I think this is a very important question, because, as I said earlier, a lot of people believe that the farm laws would have been helpful to the farmers at this juncture. And so farmers shouldn't have objected to those farm laws and so on. But the reality is, if we had allowed those farm laws, or the laws were existing now, let's be very clear, the trade would have got the opportunity to hoard as much as possible. That's what the laws abundantly said. And imagine if the trade had hoarded that quantity, what would have happened to the normal kitchen in India? First of all, I think that's an important question. I think people who are having access to food now, enough food, I think should be in fact happy that those laws were withdrawn. Otherwise, there could have been a serious crisis. Why I'm saying this is, in 2005, 2006, we had actually committed a wheat blunder. At that time, we allowed companies to go and buy directly from the farmers. I'm talking of the wheat crop. The companies did it, and they did it in a big way. And then when the government had to make an assessment for the requirement for its PDS, it found that it didn't have enough stocks. So it asked the private companies to tell them what kind of stocks they were carrying. And you will be surprised, the companies refused to divulge that what stocks they were carrying. As a result of which, India had, in the next 2 years, 2005-6 and 2006-7, India imported 7.1 million ton from the international market at a price which was double than what we had paid to farmers. So I think India should have drawn a lesson. Perhaps that's the reason why India has taken a decision now to ban exports. We cannot repeat the same wheat blunder that happened in 2005 to 2007. So there is a big lesson here that the private trade, of course, has to be regulated to see that how much quantity they can export, how much quantity they can pick it up from the country, and so on and so forth.
And lastly, we want to understand that how has been the production this season. We know that procurement has been less. There is a heat wave. The country, particularly northern areas of the country, were in the grip of a heat wave. Besides the Ukraine-Russia war, we know they are the big producers of wheat. India is in itself a big producer, but also a great consumer of wheat. How has all that impacted the situation on the ground?
Well, there is no denying that the heat wave did hit wheat production, and we know in the food bowl Punjab, according to the crop cutting experiments done by the government's department, the loss has been estimated at 5 quintals per acre. That is the loss that the Punjab farmers have suffered, and similarly, so the losses have been quite serious in Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and Madhya Pradesh. Now, that is something which has brought down or pulled down the production estimates, and the government itself has revised the production estimate, as you know, from 111 million tons to 105 million tons. But it is expected or feared, I would say, that the final estimates may be still lower. And as the season progresses, we will be able to get the final figure soon. But perhaps that kind of a thinking that the stocks would be lower because we have seen the procurement paying more than 50%. There's a drop in that. But also the production level has been pulled down. And I think that is what actually made the government to take a U-turn and go for a ban. I think production has been hit this particular year. In Punjab alone, farmers have suffered a loss of 7,200 crores. And I don't think the higher prices or the premium that the farmers got in Punjab has been able to compensate the loss, and therefore the demand for a bonus for the farmers.
That's a huge loss. Thanks so much, Devinder Sharma, for giving us such clarity on this subject. That's all we have in today's show. Thanks to our viewers for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalists.